Hi guys, this is Christine, your relationship and mindset master doctor and your leverage for change. Today I'm going to be speaking about the individual with the fearful avoidant attachment style. And this is a very complicated individual. If you're one of these individuals, you have a very difficult time in relationships, and a lot of times you're really lonely because you just can't seem to maintain relationships because you actually have not only you have one style, you have two different styles of attachment styles combined. You have the anxious preoccupied attachment style and you have the dismissive avoidant attachment style. And the way that you show up in a relationship is going to be determined by the person that you are in relationship with. So if you're in relationship with someone with a dismissive avoidant attachment style, you're going to be triggered more in your anxious preoccupied attachment style, right? And so you're going to show up almost, like an anxious preoccupied individual. And if you're, of course, if you are with an anxious preoccupied attachment style individual, you're going to show up as a dismissive attachment style. So you can understand how difficult this is for if you're that type, if you have that attachment style, or if you're in relationship with someone with this attachment style. Is really very difficult. These are the relationship guys that you hear described as on and off, hot and cold. And the on and off is really because this attachment style cannot take emotional intensity like the dismissive avoidant, right? And so, but they need emotional connection. So you see the dilemma right here. They need that emotional connection like the anxious preoccupied, but they can't take the emotional connection like the dismissive avoidance. So it's like they're like in this, it's back and forth, back and forth. Come, 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 come. I want a relationship. And when you come too close and you get too connected to them, oh, go away, go away, go away. They get very uncomfortable. So it is very difficult for both the person in relation who has this attachment style as well as who is in relationship with this person, this partner with this attachment style, because it's almost like they're consistently in opposition of each of themselves. Especially the fearful avoidant. There's like they're fighting against themselves. Like it's not an easy place for them to be at. So, but it's also difficult for the partner, right? Now, the best thing, of course, is for that person to really work on themselves to be more secure, and so to get rid of all of this kind of back and forth thing of emotions and understanding where they're coming from and trying to heal from it. But if they're not healed from it, guys, then you're going to have problems in your relationship. The next thing is the thing is that because of these two styles and because of the fact that they can almost morph into be more one style than and they actually will morph depending, and I say, on the person, depending on the style of the person they're in relationship with. So imagine this person has two different styles. It's almost like two different people, right? And then you have, if they're in a relationship with the dismissive avoidant, they're going to act out in an anxious way. But if they now go in relationship with so what happens is with this is that in the beginning, if you can't really tell, you can't really understand this person, and if you know about attachments, even if you know about attachment styles going into the relationship, it's going to be difficult pinpointing the attachment style of this person because they're constantly flip-flopping, right? Especially in the beginning, if they don't know, because if they don't know what about attachment styles either, and you kind of have an idea, even then you won't even be able to pinpoint it immediately, because it's almost as if when they realize that you're anxious, then they'll be more dismissive. You understand what I'm saying? And if in some scenarios you're more you do things that is considered to be dismissive, or you pull away, then they'll become anxious. Say, for example, you say, I'm just so tired of this, and you pull away even though you're not secure, they will become dismissive. So in the same relationship, they can be both as well, or they can do that with different partners. their core wounds as children was really distrust, and they always and so they don't trust relationships as the dismissive avoidant does not. They felt betrayed by their caregivers for not being there for them when they needed them, and so in this their adult relationships they also fear betrayal, and they don't trust relationships, so they carry all of that into their adult relationships. At one end of the spectrum, they're, as I said, they're cautious in relationship and tend to attract aloof, emotionally unavailable partners. At the end of the spectrum, they may avoid relationships altogether. When it depends on the person. As I say, everything is not set in, nothing is set in stone. So these individuals will respond from one end of the spectrum to the other. They may just always want to be in a relationship, or sometimes they just get so burned by relationships that they just want to avoid relationships altogether, right? They have the tendency to sabotage relationships if they because they do have the tendency to start feeling trapped in a relationship if they feel that this person has some type of control over them in terms of their emotions, the emotions they feel for this person. Because remember, they can feel emotions because they have that anxious, preoccupied attachment style, type in them as well. So they can feel emotions, but when they start to feel emotionally too connected to someone, they begin to feel trapped because they feel that this person now has a certain power over them, that if they leave, they probably will not be able to cope. And so they will sometimes sabotage the relationship before which they believe the person might leave them. So they self-sabotage, and they sabotage a relationship by doing things that they know is going to hurt this person and might cause this person to leave. Rather, or they might leave before the person, they think the person will leave them, so they will leave before. Even though there's sometimes no evidence that the person is going to leave them, but for fear of the person leaving them and being abandoned, they will sabotage a relationship and leave that relationship. The idea is basically that if they love that person too much, then that person is able to hurt them. So they will sabotage relationships because of that as well. For the most part, it's it's a mixed bag, really. Some do not tend to have casual relationships, but some consistently have casual relationships. So that can go either way depending on the person and at the level they are acting from, whether it's more dismissive or anxious, or and all the other things, relationships that came before that relationship. They don't trust themselves to make the right decisions in their relationships, and is usually over concerned for their safety in relationships because of the lack of safety they felt in as children, right? And they also manage their fear by avoiding any kind of discussions, because discussions about difficult subject, guys, as we all know, can be really, have some emotional intensity attached to it, and they fear emotional intensity, just like the dismissive avoidant. And so they will just not just go away. If there's a problem, instead of discussing it, they will ignore it. If something is bothering them, they will stuff it, right? And make up their own scenario inside. So they become distant and all that. You don't even know why, because they will not discuss it with you because it's too emotionally challenging and taxing for them to discuss emotionally difficult subjects, right? They may just tell you, sometimes they won't totally disappear like and quickly disappear as the pure dismissive avoidant style attachment style individual will do. They might just tell you in some email, that kind of way, because they don't want to be close to you to have that connection, right? So they'll send it in a letter, maybe a text or an email, that they don't trust you and they're leaving the relationship, or or you make them feel a certain way, but they'll probably do it via email, text, or a letter, They probably won't even want to have a phone conversation, because as that also elicits some kind of emotional, you know, a connection, and pain can be caused from that, from speaking to that person, right? They don't like confrontations, and so if there's a problem in the relationship, they would rather just ignore it than to actually try to speak to you to solve it. They don't, because they just can't take emotional confrontations or emotionally charged conversations. So rather than approaching it like the anxious preoccupied would, in most cases, they will avoid it. The pure anxious preoccupied, that is. So the reason why this developed for this attachment style is because they just did not get their emotional needs met by their caregivers. So they became, you know, they became totally dependent on the caregiver to meet their emotional needs, just like the anxious preoccupied, right? And so they never learned to self-soothe. This, could be because their needs were met some of the time, and so they never kind of broke away. They never felt the need to break away totally from their caregivers like the dismissive avoidant did, because their needs, the dismissive avoidant, the pure dismissive avoidant, meaning, when I say that, I mean that the fearful avoidant has both, and so they kind of vacillate between both anxious and dismissive, and so sometimes they take on some parts of the anxious with the dismissive as well, right? The fearful avoidant. So it's kind of very complicated with this particular attachment style. So they don't trust. They really don't trust. They've learned not to trust relationships, and or trust that their caregivers will be there for them when they actually need them. Sometimes they come, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. And there's always, for this particular attachment style, there's usually a lot of turmoil in the home, a lot of quarreling, a lot of fighting, sometimes in verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and even if the child themselves is not abused, physically or emotionally, they are victims in terms of seeing it and being a part of it. They're kind of in the middle of it, and so they experience all of the feelings of that abuse, even though they were not physically or the targets of the abuse, right? But they see it. Seeing it is just, and also they tend to also feel very helpless, that they are not able to protect either the parent that's being abused, and sometimes they blame themselves for that as well, right? So they can be very empathetic, because the way, if they were abused, they learned, or if somebody else was abused in their family, their mom, they learned to see and read micro expressions from that person who was the abuser. Say the dad would come home drunk, or the dad started to get irritable, and they're able to read all of that before he actually starts getting to be hit or shout or whatever it is that they do, right? And so they're very versed with body language. They're very empathetic, and they can understand the feelings of others. But and so that is what is one of the big differences with somebody with a dismissive avoidant attachment style. They have empathy, but they can't show it. Whereas the person with the fearful attachment style is able to show it. They're able to show it in terms of trying to do something to make that person feel better. They can't take a lot of emotional connection, but they're able to empathize and understand why that person feels the way that they feel. There's this feeling of helplessness, and in a home environment that they grew up in, that made them feel trapped. And so when they feel that feeling of helplessness in their adult relationships, they also begin to feel trapped, and feel that they can't defend themselves. But what they don't realize is that now they are adults. They've forgotten, because they've learned all of that from their children. That was what was programmed into their subconscious. They were helpless, and so they couldn't do anything about what their dad was doing to their mom, or the fights in the home, or anything. They couldn't leave. And so now they still have that thing that was seared into their subconscious from children, and now they still act as if they're children in their adult relationships, feeling helpless. And so they will start feeling trapped and want to get out. But they don't realize what they need to learn is that in fact they now have autonomy as adults, and can leave when they want, and can get out, and can do something different from what they could have done, when they were children. So guys, I'm going to stop there because this video is getting pretty long, and I hope that you learned something, guys, whether you are the person with this attachment style or whether you are the partner of someone with this attachment style. It's a difficult attachment style to be operating from. And if your partner is this attachment style, it's also very difficult to be in relationship with someone like that. My hope is that the person with this attachment style will really seek help to become more secure, and so that you can have healthy relationships, because the fact is that as an individual you want relationships, but you just don't know how to handle it. And so I would suggest that you really try to seek help, to get the help you need to become more mature, so you can have healthy relationships that you are going to feel and enjoy and be happy in, as well as your partner. Okay guys, so don't forget to check out I have memberships now for my channel. So please click on the button below that says join, and it will give you all the different levels that I have. I have 5 levels, and so if you just look at it, you'll see the different levels and see if you can find something that works for you. Also, please, if you've learned something, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and also hit the notification bell, that when I upload a new video, you will be notified immediately. So guys, until the next time, take care and have a great day. Bye-bye.